Okay, so Les, thanks for taking the time to talk to me today and the people at the University of Waterloo. I'm looking forward very much to our discussion. I thought I'd start by asking you to please describe your role at the City of Windsor and how your career led you to where you are now.
Sure. My current role at the City of Windsor is two parts right now. I'm a plans reviewer in the office, so I review plans that are submitted to the office for permits. But what I've been taking on for the last 4 years is developing our processes into a digital environment. So I've had the title of digital transformation specialist for 4 years, and it had no job description to it, but I had to create a job around it. As to what led me in my career to this, absolutely nothing. 20 years ago, if you asked me if I'd ever be doing this, I go, what is it? But looking back, kind of the reasons why I was asked to lead this was that I was 20 years on the design side. I worked with architects and engineers, and I had my own firm. So when I came out of school, I was early 90s, and so those days it was AutoCAD, and I never spent any time pencil drafting at a drafting board. I went right onto the computer. So those early days, architects' offices and engineers' office, it was all brand new to them. And I guess that really kind of led me along this path. Was I always looked for ways to do things faster, better, more efficient in the design side of the world. Then coming to the municipal, I discovered that they were back in not the Stone Age, but the paper age, and we needed to move beyond that. So I had the opportunity to think outside the box, and was told to think outside the box, and I don't think anybody's regretting it, but it's been pushing us along the way for sure.
But it sounds like although you weren't aiming at being a digital transformation specialist, your experience probably prepared you pretty well to be able to do that. Can you talk about the digital transformation activity that you've been involved in, specifically the e-permitting platform that I think you've focused a fair bit of your time on over the past few years?
Right. Windsor isn't any different than any other municipality really in Ontario, Canada, or North America, or really the world. Municipalities really didn't move very quickly out of the paper format. So the consultants over the years, and they're about 20 years ahead of municipalities. They all transferred over to CAD systems and would produce their designs, and then the last step would be print it and hand a paper copy over to municipalities. So we're seeing now COVID has helped the industry because it's forced us to accelerate this. Otherwise, it would be a slower process. But in the last 2 years, we've seen in North America huge jumps in the digital platforms to allow municipalities to catch up. And I don't think we're done yet. I think this is going to evolve over the next decade, at least, to try and catch up to the industry side in that. So really our process was to take what we did in the paper days and reapply it in a digital means to issue permits, do inspections, and receive permits from the applicant side. We also took it, to the next step on this, is that we said, if we're going to do this, then we're going to look at our processes and really adapt them to the new environment. So, you know, passing a piece of paper from one part of the department to the other. Now, we don't necessarily have to do that handoff in digital world. So to maybe envision this in a more effective way, not to duplicate what we did in paper, but to improve our processes. And I looked at it as, how much busy work could I get out of our lives? Um, we're code consultants. We know our building code inside and out, and that's where we do our best job, not shuffling paper from one person to another. And so, in the new environment, we've tried to get away from that busy work. The other things we incorporated into the environment was messaging and communications to the public. You know, if somebody called in, we'd follow up with an email in the old days, or or it was paper notes that from one person to another. It didn't, if I took notes, and even if I took it in the computer, it wasn't necessarily available to my peers if I was on vacation. So we've moved that all into the same environment to speed up our work, so that if one of my coworkers is off next week for a vacation and somebody calls on their project, I have all their notes. I see everything. I can then communicate with efficiency instead of saying, sorry, you got to wait 2 weeks until they get back. So that was a lot of our efforts, was to provide a platform not just for our use, but it was for our customer interaction to improve the process for them as well.
So the benefits came to the city. They also came to external users, and those were things like that work that was repetitive, boring, not taking advantage of the skills that people had. That you were able to reduce that work and at the same time improve the quality and the way the work was done, and the experience of the user as part of the process too. So those basically were the main benefits. Would that be right?
Yeah, definitely. That when you look at transforming a process into a digital world, you've got to look at how it affects all users. That it's not just geared towards one. In our side, in our case, we have two sides. We have the applicant side and the municipal side. And so, coming from the design world, I knew their pains from applying. But then, being in the municipal world, I understood now the pains in the municipal side. So when we designed this, we looked at both sides all the time, because if you only look at one side, you've only achieved half your goal, really.
And you were in, a perfect position to be able to drive this project from both a customer and a user point of view, or an internal user, if you like, point of view, which is to some degree rare, or not as common as a project being run by people who may simply just specialize in the technology. Can you talk, though, I want to talk about the technology for a minute or two, about how you selected the technology that you would use for the project?
So part of our process to select the technology, we went through, like other municipalities do. They kind of look at what their neighbors do, and so we looked at what other large municipalities were doing, and talked to the people involved in it. We discovered that technology was so new in this area that no one really had a handle of what to do with it. that uh, the approach that they found they had to take was a piece at a time. We'll focus on this area, improve this, and then we'll move on to the next area. The frustrations on that is that it was a never-ending project to them. That it wasn't a software you could buy off the shelf. It wasn't. Everybody was creating something unique for their municipality that wasn't even shareable between other municipalities. We started realizing that everybody went down that road. We then started looking at, okay, with our technology department, what can we do internally? And we could make some small achievements, but it wasn't enough to really impact the overall program, and it wasn't a big enough impact to achieve our goals. I was fortunate enough to run into a company that was based out of Finland, and they started this e-permitting software in Finland about 7 years. Well, now it's probably about 11 years ago, and 80 to 90% of their country all uses the same software. And what they had achieved in those years, we looked at and we said, we get where you're going with this, and the approach you're taking, and it was everything from pre-consultation to on a project going in from permit right through to occupancy and completion of the project through construction and inspections. So with guidance from city leadership and the council mayor, we entered into a relationship with Cloud Permit as our supplier to develop something for not only for Windsor but for Ontario. That Windsor was willing to get back to our basics, not hang on to things that were uniquely Windsor, and work around the code that we deal with, the building code, and develop a system that not only would work for Windsor but for other municipalities. So that's really where we trying to find a solution that not only worked for us but our neighbors and anybody else that Cloud Permit wanted to work with was our goal, because they basically already set a standard in Finland that we could build off of. So, and it's worked well for us, and worked well for Cloud Permit as well.
Absolutely. And so your efforts meant that you were able to take advantage of other people's development and research on the product. And but there are a lot of organizations that start from scratch on things like this and many other things too. And I think usually it's wise to have a look and see what others have done, and whether there's something there that is going to save you the time and the resources. Right.
And I think what was really effective for us is that although there was small differences between how building departments operate in Finland versus Ontario, worldwide it really is still the same concept. You have a consultant that produces a design, you have a group that reviews it, you have construction that goes on, there's inspections, and then they occupy a building. That really, those basic steps are worldwide. Even as much as I talk to counterparts around the world and they say, well, ours is different. Well, when you start boiling it down, yeah, there's some minor differences, but really we're all in it's the same basic structure. So working with a company that understood the basics of construction and the municipal role on that is moved us well ahead. So in Windsor, it was a model of 3 teams working together. I was part of the business unit and led the business unit. We had Cloud Permit was the software supplier, and then we had our information technologies that from the city of Windsor that coordinated and brought linked our efforts up to the legacy systems in the city so that we could communicate to other departments as well.
Important. So, what were the main challenges that you faced in the project, and how did you overcome these?
There were a couple challenges. The first one was the kind of breaks down into two areas. You had legacy information technologies that you needed to work with, but you also had legacy humans. We don't call them a technology, but when you have somebody that's used to doing something for 30 years the same way, it's hard to think of doing it a different way. So on the human side, that was our biggest challenge, is to imagine how to do it differently. You know, people had learned to work around the issues to the point that they were no longer issues anymore. But when you move to a new system and a new way of doing things, those issues come back up, and what people considered workarounds before, now's your opportunity to resolve them. So with staff and that human factor, you get into thinking outside the box, training, and then really, I mean, that's just the municipal side, but you also have the public side that have been used to doing it the same way for decades, and you throw something new at them and they go, oh, and what are we supposed to do with this? So on the human side, that's a huge challenge. On the technology side, when you're working with a legacy system that isn't going to be updated or changed anytime soon because it's the octopus of the corporation, then you have to learn how to find ways to tie in your new software with the old software and communicate. So for building department, a lot of our processes that we did were tied to a legacy software that was a step-by-step software. If you don't do step A before B, then you can't get to C. And to talk about, well, we avoid all those things because then we take it out of the computer system, do it outside of the tracking software, and then at the last minute when we've done A, B, C, D, E, but not in that order, and then put it into the computer so we can issue the permit. And so when you have a new software that doesn't constrain you and an old software that does, it's hard to talk together. So it was, on the technology side, that was probably our biggest challenge, to deal with that.
Could you talk about a little bit more about the changes that were needed in people's jobs as a result of the project, and how you managed their transition into their new activities?
We didn't see a huge change in jobs. Plans reviewer moved from doing it in paper to doing it on a computer. It wasn't a huge challenge to do it that way. Our intake staff moved from doing it with paper to computer. It wasn't a huge change. The after effects is that what a position like a clerk, a file clerk, starts going, well, now I don't have files anymore. We still have a decade's worth of files that have to be dealt with, but there's no new files coming in. So that was more the position that's changing the most, that it's gone from a paper-driven clerk to now a data-driven clerk. So instead of, they're still responsible for the data, but now they're responsible in a digital way. They're not putting away file folders, but they're more ensuring that we're completing the files, that everything is in the electronic files before completion. So that was the one area that changed the most for us.
Okay, and most people were able to make that change reasonably smoothly, or
Yeah, really. Yes. Well, they had to.
okay.
um, I started, even long before we started having the intake software, we started doing plans review on the computer. So we'd get PDFs and we do that. Um, our plan was to get me, 6 months ahead of everybody and work out the bugs before they had to. So instead of doing a hard transition, is put it on one person's shoulders, or even a couple of people's shoulders to figure out the issues, get around them, and then move beyond that. There was reluctance. So one of our plans examiners, he he'd been in the city for 15, 20 years, and he saw what I was doing, and he chat with me. He said, I can't see doing my job digitally. He says, and I talked to him why, and he said, and he'd take me to his office, and he says, I have a stack of 200 papers here. I want to be able to flip back and forth, put post-it notes on, highlight stuff, write notes. And he says, I can't do that digitally. Today, if I said, can I take your computer away from you and you want to do it paper? There is no way he wants that. He has now learned that digital can do an equivalent, but even better. So I think it's the biggest challenge with that is perception and understanding how to adapt through taking what you did in a manual format and into a digital. The biggest thing we've seen is our file clerks appreciate it better, is that he no longer puts 100 staples into the paper. Now, and they're not ripping them out to scan all the paper. So, so to see that advancement in people and learning to do that, it has been exciting for me to watch. And it took a lot of effort to convince people. We talk about how to make digital change. You need to have champions for it. Somebody that's a resource that people can throw problems at and they solve it right away. That there's no solution, no problem too big, that there's always a solution for it. And I think I've read that there's been attempts by various companies to go digital, but they seem to not always make that transition easy. And I often wonder whether or not they took into that human factor into the equation, that put technology in place, but that to convince people to use it, to teach them, to make sure that they have very few pains in the process, whether that would have made the difference in it.
I mean, the way that I hear you talking about this, you thought very carefully about it when you were thinking about how the new technology would be introduced, and you were very focused on the experience that people had as you did introduce it. So you thought about it ahead, and then as it was introduced, it appears in the way you described the detail of the experience of the user, that you were very closely focused on that and wanting to make sure that it went as smoothly as possible.
I'd like to say that that was the case, but you're talking to me now after 4 years of doing this. I'm now educated. Now I know what I need to do. It wasn't the case. We recognized that we would have challenges. We didn't know what they would be. We didn't know how we were going to resolve them, but we took the approach that we were going to be agile. And we talk about software being agile development. Well, I think the approach on the human side has to be agile as well. That if you may not know what the problems will be, but if you're willing to take them on and deal with them and find a solution and keep pursuing it, I think that works well. I don't know if I were to go to another municipality, whether the challenges would be the same. I'd have a whole lot more experience, but we're all different as humans, and those personality mixes create a new dimension that it's hard to anticipate. I think that was the success that we had, is that being flexible, and you can train 20 people at the same time, but there might be 3 individuals that really need training one-on-one, because as a group they don't absorb it. There's different approaches. You can write down instructions for some people. Other people need a video. Some people need to be shown 3 or 4 times to memorize it. There's no one way to do anything. If you don't have all the tools in your toolbox, somebody's going to be left out in the cold.
Great advice on on dealing with people and the differences between them, and responding to do whatever needs to be done to help them make the move. And I think a valuable response. What was the impact? I wanted to turn now to the technology specialists and the technology department, who you mentioned had a role in the implementation earlier. But I was interested in what the impact was on them, how prepared they were for the project, and how you managed that part.
I think they were like ourselves. None of us were prepared. We had an idea of where we were going, but it really is a team effort. That they know their world inside and out. The business knows their world inside out, and then the supplier knows theirs, and it's a way to communicate in all 3 groups to mesh together. And I think that was the biggest change that our information technology group discovered, that the building department was prepared with somebody like myself that could speak a bit of their language, speak all of my language, and it's like almost like 3 different countries with 3 different languages. You got to find some way to interpret. That everybody has their acronyms and short forms, and what they may use a word like they're all 3 groups could use the same word, but it's totally different meanings. And I think that was the biggest challenge, is to not only bring the IT group into my world, but me into their world, so that we could communicate.
Very important, understanding that different people see the world in different ways, and that to be successful in this type of project, you've got to bring that together somehow and get all that to work together effectively. And very, I think, valuable advice. Just got 2 more questions. First of all, can you talk about what happened after the main work on the project? was done? Was there work that you needed to do to continue to ensure it was successful after that? Presumably, there wasn't one day before and one day after the project, and nothing around that.
Yeah, the work doesn't stop once you start using the software. So we we looked at whether we could softly make a transition or just flip a switch and make the transition. Both processes have their pros and cons. I convinced everybody we're just going to flip a switch and switch. So it wasn't only, you know, you can train and prepare people beforehand only so much until they start using it. You don't know how they're going to find things that you never tested. And some people are really good at finding things that you didn't test, um, or come up with situations that you go, okay, so no, we didn't look at that, and give me 15 minutes and let me see if I can find a solution for you. Or to the worst is that we don't have a solution and I need to go back to the software provider and we need to do some tweaking in this area, which is a longer process. Um, so we've continued to help craft the development on this. Our software provider is doing updates every 3 weeks. So they're continuing their goal as a company and a provider for this service is to continually improve it. So we knew day one it wasn't perfect software. We knew that we would have areas that doesn't work perfectly, but going into it, we knew that we were working with a provider that was going to take those issues, improve upon them, and not only offer us a better service, but all their clients. So their structure as a company is good that way. So yeah, and we're still tweaking our procedures and how we work with the public to communicate to them and finding out how they can mess up software and go, okay, so now we need to educate the public more in this area. And so I really feel that you're not done ever.
Yeah.
and I'm the type of person go, okay, so we've hit this level of achievement. Okay, what do I need to do to move up to the next level? So, is there, a better PDF reviewing software that we should be using rather than what we do? Is there more training that we need to do to improve our skills? So there's a continual effort to improve along the way.
Yeah, and what you're saying is very valuable. The understanding that you're going to need to solve problems after, or you're going to continue to make improvements, might be a more positive way to express it. Uh, is I think critical that people understand, but also you mentioned that the vendor, their willingness to be part of that process and also to be the benefits value that you get of then continuing to improve the product itself is also important to mention, because when people are making their choices about vendors, you're understanding that this might be something that they want to look at and have as a factor in their decision making is valuable advice, I think.
And we've moved into a new technology age, really, that no longer does software have to sit on your computer. No longer do you have to download an update. Cloud Permit is named that way for a reason. It's sitting on the cloud. So improvements for software get pushed out. They're in this case, they're development team is still sitting in Finland. They have a team, a large team in not Windsor, but in North America now. But they've chosen to keep their development team in Finland, and you know, I don't have to worry about time differences. I work with a team that's here in North America. They can feed the team in Finland, and it just gets magically fixed. I know it's not magic, but it feels like that some days when you know, this note pops on my screen and says, when it's convenient, reload the browser because we fixed something. Most times I don't know what they fixed, but so.
But of course, if you had built all this yourself, you wouldn't have the benefit of all these resources that you get from the vendor, right?
The difference with building something for yourself and not, in our case, we've gone with a provider that's now we move into a service contract with them, and now we pay for it. We're past the project, but now we're into a service contract that has these improvements built into it. So the traditional way was that you would build a solution in-house or with a provider. It would get plugged in, you'd start using it, and then you would never touch it again. and if you needed to make changes, you made another project to make these changes. Whereas we're now moving into an area that we can, not that we're going, again, if we need to make major changes, it's going to be a project. But if it's minor that helps their whole community, then it gets involved, folded into the program itself.
Okay, I just got one last question, which is kind of a catch-all. It's what guidance do you have for engineers that are considering their own role in digital transformation? What can they do to maximize the effectiveness of the contribution they make and the impact it'll have on their careers? So it's a big question, I guess. And your thoughts?
It is. When I'm not an engineer, I'm your counterpart. I'm on the architectural side. But when I've worked with engineers and done engineering projects for years as a designer. So when I think of engineers, I think of people that do think outside the box, that do look for a better solution in their lives. So in how they can impact things. So if you're considering things that are down the road for, to deal with digital transformation, I think you're in a good position because you're the personality is all ready to do that. Approach, and it may not be like, for me, I would never have thought I would have done this, but and you may not do this early in your careers, or early on you may only touch pieces of this, but looking for opportunities to improve your workplace, the world around you, in a digital way to make effects in society is, I think, a goal of most engineers to think that way. So my encouragement is keep pushing all the limits in every direction every time. You don't have to be a specialist in every area, but a general understanding in how to push the boundaries is a good approach.
And very good advice. Thank you for talking to me, Les. There's a wealth of knowledge here that is going to be valuable to the people who watch this. So thank you for taking the time to do it.
You're welcome. I was glad to do it.